Hello, everyone. I'm Julianne Meyer. You are watching Own Your Wellness. And before we get started, I've got a really funny story to tell. So I just got off a phone call before the show with an amazing person that I'd never met before. And we were talking about how we have to do this kind of a show. You have to think on your feet sometimes. Things come up. You never know. Lo and behold, that literally just happened. We had some major technical difficulties. And I was thinking to myself, I'm going to have to do this show live by myself, and I have nothing prepared. But fortunately, our guest today, we were able to work it out and get him on. And so there's plenty of internet service so we can chat for the next hour. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our guest today, Joe McQueen. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited that you're here. Woo! Talk about stressful.
Well,
I was like, what's an easy solution? Telephone. Let's use your telephone. That should work.
God bless these pocket computers, huh?
I know, right? Oh my goodness. But let's just jump right in. I would love to start out with you telling us a bit about yourself and your wellness journey.
Well, I'm currently an alternative school principal. I oversee 2 campuses in Central Illinois. Gosh, my wellness journey. I mean, as a kid, had a lot of major issues. I was diagnosed as a attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, and oppositional defiant. Had a behavior disorder. All the fun things that make for a really enjoyable kid to be around. But I was super funny, and I like to think relatively cool. And I got in a lot of trouble and joined the military to get away from it. And when I got out of the military, I met my wife, girlfriend at the time, but 25 years later, we're still here. She said, what do you want to do with your life? And I hadn't really thought about it. And so I went to college and I worked residential treatment at the time. And I just loved those kids, like those kids that I felt like people kind of didn't want around. They got rid of them. They threw them away. And I thought, these are like my people. I'm one of these kids. And so I went to school and I became a special education teacher with the focus on really behavioral stuff. And I've spent the last 25 years working residential detention centers as a drug and alcohol counselor, as a principal, as a special ed coordinator. And I've done a lot of work in turning programs around and really focusing on how to teach people how to deal with those kids in a better way, in a more therapeutic, calm. Like we got into this kind of groove where we treated kids like kids, and we forgot sometimes that they were humans with trauma and struggles and a backpack of stuff every day that they carry with them. And so I've done a lot of training over the years, and somebody suggested I put it in a book, so that's what I did.
I love that. I love that you've been able to take such a negative sort of in your life and turn it into something to help others and move forward and remind adults that these are human beings, because there's so many. And, I know I've been guilty of it myself, thinking, oh, you're just a bratty little kid. But we don't know what they're going through. We don't understand, I don't walk in their shoes. So I guess my next question would be really basic. And that is, what does a parent do when they're trying to communicate with their child and they might have a behavioral disorder? Is there, certain things that are tips or tools that they can use to just get the conversation going?
I think one of the biggest thing is that their behavior is not always a reflection on you as a parent. So don't take it personally. Behaviors are emotions that are based on needs. And if that need's not being met, then you have to find what that need is that's leading to that emotion that ends with the behavior. I mean, all behavior serves a purpose. I break it down super simple when I talk to our students. Like, if I'm hungry, my behavior is I eat. If I'm sleepy, my behavior is, normally I go to sleep. But sometimes our behaviors, we push ourselves beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
But, all behavior serves a purpose, positive or negative. And we have to find out what that need is. And so I think with parents, it's just step back, calm down, take a deep breath. It's not you. They're going through a little something. Ask them what they need. What do they need from you? How can you help them? And just remind them that you're there for them and give them space.
Space, that's one of those things that I think is kind of hard to do, especially when you know your child is struggling. It's like the helicopter comes out.
Yeah, it takes a lot of self-regulation on the adult's behalf, I find.
It does, doesn't it? But what about if, I mean, obviously we can't be all things for our kids, even if we
Mhm.
want to be. How, and if, I guess my question would be, if you're not, or maybe they are seeing a therapist, I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to them having other adults that are a positive influence in their lives, whether it be a teacher or a coach or anything like that. Is there a way for, since you do teach children, is there a way for parents to create some sort of a health net for their children with, say, teachers and coaches and people like that?
I think the biggest thing is just communicate openly and honestly. I'm an educator. I have been for 25 years, and I would be quick to say, not all teachers are great teachers, but most of them are pretty compassionate and caring. And I think that if they have somebody in their life that your kid is drawn to, figure out if it's a positive thing,
Mm-hmm.
and embrace that and team up with that person and allow them to be, as much of a part as they can. So if it's a teacher, communicate with that teacher, let them know what's going on at home, let them know what the kids are saying. I think that communication piece breaks down. And so I know, as somebody who's been in a classroom, I get a lot of kids that show up to school and I don't know what happened until I start having conversations. And I don't want to pry into their personal lives, but when
Mm-hmm.
they come in and they're a little bit off, it usually takes a 20-minute conversation, a little snack, some getting to know, just break the ice for the day. And if, I've had a few parents over the years, not many, I think mostly because of the world I work in, that have just called and said, look, Frank had a terrible night last night. This is what went on. This is what happened. And then I can say, okay, I will totally be proactive with them when they come into school. My
Mm-hmm.
approach will look different. My conversations will look different. And we'll get them geared up and see if we can work through this as a team. And I think that would be the same thing with, a coach that they have, that they play little league or football or any kind of sport, um, or any extracurricular activities. I don't, if they're a scout or any kind of clubs, just letting those people know who have that positive influence. Because I remind parents all the time, when your kid hits about 12, your job's done. Their peer group takes over, and you just have to pray that you've instilled enough morals in them that they know when to say no. So if they're into another adult, especially when they're junior high, high school, man, that probably because they're cooler than you, because you're a parent, you don't know anything. Tap into that opportunity to get that parent, that other adult, to work with you cooperatively, and you guys can really kind of surround that kid with some really positive stuff.
I love that idea too, because, it takes a village.
It does.
It really does. Oh my goodness. Something that you mentioned earlier about behaviors and emotions. And have you noticed that there are certain things that parents or just adults in general sort of miss as, something that might be construed as a bad behavior that typically means there's something really wrong?
I think a lot of times, um, we get so busy in our lives that we we brush things off, or we don't meet kids where they are emotionally. One of
Mhm.
the key things I try to tell, and I have two great stories around it, but I won't tell you them today. When I do trainings with teachers, is if it's real to them, it's real to me, and if it's
Mhm.
a big deal to them, it's a big deal to me. Even if in the larger picture of things, because we as adults have fully functioning, fully developed brains, so we think far more rationally, we think far more cognitively. Teenagers are very impulsive and emotional, just brain development. That's just how they see the world. They see the world through a lens of a higher level of emotion, a higher level of insecurity, and a lot of impulsivity. And so there might be something, I tell a story about my daughter losing a brush, and I have three daughters, so God knows we have brushes. But it was important to her on that day. And so on that day, I was 10 minutes late for work because it became important to me. And
Oh.
even though in my mind I thought, dear God, I will go buy you a brush. Um, it opened the door later for when she was 14 and 15 and had her first breakup, for her to feel like I would take her seriously and come sit with me and talk with me. So it's those little things. If it's a big deal to them, we can't be patronizing and pretend, but if we meet them where they're at and go, oh my God, that's a big deal to you. What's up? What do you need from me? How can I help? Like, gosh, man, you're struggling with this. If we take it seriously, it's those little things that I think a lot of times we just blow off. We're like, oh my God, fix it and go away, or do this and stop, because we get caught up in our lives. And it's those, all those little things mean something. So take a second and embrace those little things and work through them. And that trust and that willingness for them to talk with you about the bigger things stays open. Because as soon as you come off as it's not that big of a deal, I don't care, they think, because they're teenagers and the way they think is very irrational, very impulsive, very emotion driven. They think, well, you just don't care about anything. You don't care about all the stuff. So I'm just not going to talk to you at all. And that's the same thing with younger kids. We instill that in our 8 and 9-year-olds. Like, that's not that big of a deal. Shut up and stop crying. What's a big deal to them? And we don't want them growing up thinking like, all my problems are dumb and pathetic and little, and my parents don't care about them. No, they're all a big deal, and we care about them. We just got to stop for a minute and go, okay, let me stop and deal with this.
It's kind of interesting that you'd share that, because I have this very vivid memory, and you'll appreciate this. I just learned how to ride a bike, and I'd been over at the Ricky's house right next door, and I come running home all excited, and I tell my mom and my stepdad, I learned how to ride a bike. Oh my gosh, can you come see me? And they said, and it was my stepdad, but my mom went along with it, next commercial break. And now that I'm older, I'm thinking seriously, but but I just remember being so hurt by that. And I still think, wow, no wonder I didn't feel important to them. That's how I felt. Like, it's this huge accomplishment and they didn't even acknowledge it. TV was more important.
Yeah. I mean, to them, riding a bike seems so natural, and that's what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
But to you in that moment, that was a life change. Your means of travel had just changed. A great deal.
Exactly. I will say this though, they had some drinking issues and things like that. So they weren't necessarily thinking rationally either. But, that brings up the whole point too of, when you worked in this situation with like the kids that what did you call them, that they get thrown away, or the ones that nobody wants to work with?
A lot of the kids, even, I mean, that's sort of the way I see these things, is that, at some point people gave up and put you with me or within my facility's care, whether that's alternative school or residential where they send you to live. Now I get, because I get to read your file and I get to see your paperwork, like you have a pattern of some pretty tough stuff, but, the way that they view that, they don't view that as I did these 15 things. I stole 3 cars and got caught with drugs 9 times and I've been on probation since I was 13. What they see is now I'm 17 and they sent me away because nobody cares. They've given up on me. They've just thrown me away. I'm not good enough to have around anymore. Now, while that's 100% not true, a lot of their behavior contributed to that. They're young and they're irrational and they think very impulsively and very emotionally just based on brain development. Yeah. And that's the way they interpret that. And so I knew as a kid, people didn't like being around me all the time. I had a smart mouth. I was ADHD. I was like the poster child for hyperactivity. So I would talk too much and butt in and didn't have the best social skills. And I knew what it was like for people to just be like, go away, just go away. And I feel like, they feel that way on like 1,000 times higher level, because people weren't just telling them to go away, that they were annoying, to shut up, they're stupid and things like that. They actually sent them away. And, while I would not argue that they didn't earn their the right to be there, that's the way they see it. And I think that what they need is an adult to say, look, you made some mistakes and it's hard to handle your behavior where you're at, but nobody's given up on you.
That's a really good distinction that needs to be made, because like you said, you can't, we're thinking about it as adults from our point of view, where of course you're, I love you. Tough love is still love, but I know I've definitely, I was a good kid too. Don't get me wrong. I barely did anything wrong, but there was times that, I really felt like that. Like my parents didn't even care. And I can look back on it now and realize that I was just emotional. It had nothing to do with reality. but when you're in it, it sure as heck feels real. Oh my gosh. So I guess my next question would be, do you ever, how do you get a child or like a teenager to sort of see things differently, or maybe recognize that they are worth more than they are giving themselves credit for?
I think it's a lot of patience, because again, their peer group has more control than you, and if their
Mhm.
peers are telling them that they're worthless, it doesn't matter. It's like your mom telling you you're pretty. You feel like, well, she has to. That's her job, of course, mom. Um, so when their peer group is tearing them down, that's difficult, and it's really hard to. I mean, really, to sum it up most simple, just be supportive, because it's going to be hard to change their mind, because their mind is so focused in a different way than our. See, we're very forward thinkers as adults. We rationalize.
Mhm.
We think about what'll happen next. What 5 years down the road will this look like? Or this is just in the moment. It'll be fine. I can get out of this. I can handle this, and then I'll be away from it, and then I'll be with like my people, and I'll be okay. Teenagers they don't see things that way. They see things in the moment, and they process things in the moment, and they get very emotional in the moment, and then they carry that little, baggie of emotion with them. And you know I think just being super supportive. I know that my daughters have gone through, some difficult times, a rebellious stage with one of them, and now she's older and getting ready to graduate from college, and she's like, you were just so patient and never got angry and just talked to me. And she's like, now I thought you were mean because you would take things away and you would give me like these long lectures, and you nailed my window shut once. I was like, yeah, I really did. She was like, but looking back, like you were just totally mellow and supportive, and like everything you were saying was true. And I was like, yeah. So I think just being patient and understanding, like, man, if I had the words to tell a teenager that would change them, then I wouldn't have written a book. I just would have written a pamphlet, and then I would have been a millionaire. Um,
I
so
hear
I,
you.
yeah. So I think it's just patience and being calm and really listening to them. Like, what's going on with you? What do you need? Why are you seeing things this way? What's really happening? Just communication with them.
I love that. On that note, it is time for us to go to a commercial break. So we're going to be back in just a minute. For those of you who are watching us live, thank you so much for being here. As I mentioned, it is commercial time, but when we come back, we're going to talk with Joe about his book, about, what to find in it, and just continue the conversation. We'll see you in just a minute.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us now, I'm Julianne Meyer. You're watching Own Your Wellness, and today's amazing guest is Joe McQueen. Welcome back to the show, Joe. So glad to have you here today.
Oh, I'm honored to be here. I thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a pleasure. So, before we went to commercial break, I was mentioning that you have a book. And for those of you who are watching, this is what drew me to Joe because, just the way you help other people. I'm always looking for people that are amazing. But, when you can help others and create a book and grow and do all these wonderful things, like, yeah, we got to get you on the show. So tell us about, well, let's start with the title of your book first.
The title is Calming Young Minds. And I think that's really the goal, is to be able to just, we talk about, understanding mental health. There's also, we talk about de-escalation, trauma, restorative practices. And a lot of that, if you strip it away for what it is, it's really just keeping kids calm and allowing them to communicate openly and safely with a group that they feel, or at least a person that they feel safe with and can process things with.
I love that. And where can people find the book?
It is on Amazon. If you just go on to good old Amazon and type in Calming Young Minds by Joe McQueen, it'll pop right up. You can do that while you do all your other Amazon shopping.
I love that. I don't always ask this question of authors, but I wanted to ask you, because you already have such a full life and, with work and kids and everything else, you and I both know that writing a book is quite an undertaking. So really, what was it that you thought, okay, I'm going to create the time to really get this information out here for people?
Well, I speak at a lot of conferences within our state, and also on some national conferences. I go and I do some trainings and some pull-out sessions. And I was at one about a little over a year ago in Las Vegas. And it was a major national conference. And one of the guys who was a keynote, I didn't know was sitting in my session. And so afterwards, he took my information, which a lot of people do. They never call it. They take the information. And I appreciate each and every one of them. But he called me at work and said, hey, I was in your session in Las Vegas at Innovative Schools. And I go, oh, okay, yeah. There was like a couple hundred people there, And I said, yeah. I thought I saw you in the back. You were one of the keynotes. And he's like, yeah. He said, best session I sat through the entire 5 days. And I go, thank you. It means a lot. And he's like, I just want to know where can I buy your book? And I was like, oh man, dude, I don't have a book, man. And he said, how do you not have a book, but you're speaking at like national conferences? And I go, honestly, I just send them a little synopsis of my trainings and they let me come. Like, I don't know. I thought that's what everybody did. And he said, at the end of your training, at your end of your session, you had like 5 trainings listed that you do. He said, why don't you just take like your top 3 and put them in a book? He's like, you already have them on PowerPoint. You've already done all the research. Just put them in a book format. And I thought, oh, I'll see. So I'm up every morning around 4:30 or 5. And usually I just go to work. I'm at work about 2 hours before all the other teachers, because as a principal, I like to be done with what I can so I can be in the classrooms. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just dedicate an hour every morning and then, 2 hours every night to just converting all this stuff and writing it and getting it in a format. And I have a lot of little anecdotal stories that I think make a difference. It's a lot of the feedback I get from educators is like, I like that you share real experience. So I thought I got to put all those in there. I tried to be lazy and do speech to text, and that was horrific. So I just went back to typing. And then I just started cranking it out, just started putting it on paper and working on it as much as I could every day.
I love that so much. I just want to pop this up again so that people can see when they go look for your book, what it looks like as well. I'm a visual person, so I want people to be able to find things. I'm like, all right, is that it? Is that it? I actually had a guest on not that long ago, and he literally just released his book, and then he found out somebody else is releasing a book with the same title in the next week. I was like,
oh no.
Man, that's so crazy. But anyway, so with your trainings, this is kind of like not an abridged version, but kind of like the work, do it yourself kind of a thing. In a way. Is that kind of a good way to put it? I'm asking.
Well, I mean, I have an LLC, so I contract and go into schools, but I'm
Hmm.
also part of my regional office's consortium, so I do it for any of the service schools in our service area for, well, I wouldn't say free. They pay my regional office, but they don't pay me. And the big thing is, they're like 4 to 6 hours minimum. I'd like to have a full day. But the way professional development is, I mean, I get a lot of schools that are like, hey, can you come out for 2 hours and teach our teachers how to de-escalate? And I'm like, I mean, sort of. I can. I go. I feel like we should concentrate a lot on trauma and brain development, and then we'll just talk about some tips to de-escalation. Because if you understand that, you'll be a little better off.
Hmm.
Um, but I've had schools that have let me come out. I went out to a whole district and did 2 days, 2 full days with them, and I know reaching back to their principal and talking to him, he's like, it made a huge difference, huge difference. And I went out to a school in Chicago and did a full day of just trauma and de-escalation and teen brain development. And that principal said, God, I'm glad you were here the whole day. They asked a ton of questions, and I saw a difference in their approaches with our kids the next Monday because I came in on a Friday. So I think
Wow.
if you give time, because it really is a whole shift, it's a whole mindset shift because,
Hmm.
we're still sort of caught in this idea that when kids act out, they should be punished. And that punishment should be something harsh that either embarrasses them or makes them feel bad, or, we can't inflict pain anymore. And that's a lot of what I'm saying. Don't do that. Like, stop doing that and deal with the issue behind the issue.
Hmm.
There's a lot of different ways to get kids to think about their behavior and learn from their behavior and
Hmm.
become better people because they've had an opportunity to learn from their behavior. And I think back to me, like if I knew that I was going to get a whooping, or, back then teachers could use corporal punishment. I got spanked a few times in front of my school classrooms. They pull you to the front of the classroom, they bend you over and just whack you with the paddle 4 times. And my only thing that I analyzed, is it worth the 4 hits? And there were a lot of times in my little behavior disorder brain that I thought it's 100% worth it. I'll take those 4 hits. It'll be done in 10 seconds and then I can move on. I've learned nothing but how to take a whooping, but I never
Hmm.
learned anything about my behavior.
Yeah. I think that that's a really good point. And something that I was thinking about is it just shows like the lack of patience, even from like the top down, because how are you really supposed to, as a teacher and, even as a parent, like, do learn how to change in 2 hours? I mean, come on, that's like such a huge topic to how to de-escalate. It's like, okay, but that's not really what the issue is. you know, why are you de-escalating? Let's ask a better question to get going. But I like this idea of, you know, basically trying to make it a learning experience, because if shaming ourselves worked, or being mad at ourselves worked, even, and I'm just referring to, then we would all be perfect little humans that do everything we said we're going to do, eat super healthy, go to the gym all the time. We know as adults that doesn't work, so why are we still trying to do that from how we train kids? And it's like
Yeah, it's change is hard, and I think the easiest example I give on change is, if change was easy, I would have 6-pack abs and like huge guns, because I would eat different. I would go to the gym for 3 4 hours a
Mhm.
day. I would do cardio, but that's a lot
Mhm.
of change. I don't want to stop eating ice cream and watching Netflix. And
Mhm.
could I do it? I could. Am I willing to make that change because I know that it's a really hard change to make? Not right now.
Yeah.
Um, but if it was an easy thing, like you said, we'd all be in great shape and eating healthy, and there'd be all kinds of things if change was easy. But it's hard, and it's really hard if you've got a trauma attached to things, and
Yeah.
um, some serious emotional barriers that hold you back from taking those scary steps.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like there's always, speaking of addiction and trauma, when I worked in addiction recovery, there was a couple of people in there that, who were older and they had drug issues because, they got on opioids prescribed by their doctor. But that was not the norm. The norm was typically, this is how people were trying to deal with their pain, whether it
Mhm.
be physical, mental, or emotional. And there was always, every person had some sort of trauma. I don't care who it was. They all had some sort of trauma. Something happened. And it's like, how do you address that? But I guess my question would be, and this is more for adults as opposed to children, How do you know if something is a trauma? Are there certain like physical signs? I mean, because like I know that when I worked with trauma people, it was always, oh, mine's not as bad as Sally's, or mine's not as bad as Joe's. You know, it's not really that bad. That's not a trauma. It's not compared to Mary Ann's over there. You know, so like, how do people? How could they even like accept that maybe what they've dealt with is something traumatic?
I think first we have to see the idea that we're all resilient in different ways. If you and I were in the same car and experienced a car accident where we both, I don't know, broke two of our fingers and bumped our head, same amount of injuries, nothing different. I might a week later be back in my car driving 90 on the freeway. You may process that differently and for months can't get in the passenger seat of a vehicle and are afraid to drive. It doesn't make you weak and me strong. It just means that our levels of resiliency to process that level of trauma are different. And so I think people process trauma differently. But I think really, if something sticks with you and it causes you, emotional baggage in any way, you're carrying that around with you. That memory kind of flashes back. That's something you think back to a lot. It affected you when you look back on it. That's how you could say maybe that was something that was traumatizing for me, and I need to process it and go through it. I think there's high levels of trauma where people are brutally assaulted and things like that, or experience some terrible things. But I think that we try to overlook, and for really, I would say our parents' generation, for them it was like, you got beaten, or you got nobody showed up to any of your football games and showed up to any of your basketball games, and we didn't care, and suck it up and get over it, you little baby. Well, that's kind of traumatizing because it sets the stage for how you process relationships and how much you value yourself, as far as, well, the things that I do, people don't care about. Well, that's a level of trauma, because now you process that, you've carried that little, baggie of baggage with you, that you process things differently based on those situations. And that, so trauma is qualifying differently, I think, for everybody. Kids who grow up in the streets and they're exposed to violence at an early age, it's not that it doesn't traumatize them. They just become numb to it. And
they're used to it. Yeah.
And so for them to see somebody, get mugged, it's not as traumatizing as for somebody who's never seen it before, because they've been processing that world around them since they were small kids. And it's not that they don't have trauma from it. It's become a norm. They've become a little bit more resilient and process it faster and differently.
So my next question would be, do you have to have a therapist in order to process trauma?
I mean, I think everybody should have a therapist, in my opinion. I think everybody should see a therapist for at least a year minimum in their life. Once when they're young, and again when they're old. So I guess that's 2 years. I would require or suggest 2 years. I mean, I don't think you have to, but I don't think it's healthy to try to process it on your own unless you're in, I think, support groups work. I worked in recovery for quite a while, and I think groups like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous are great for processing trauma, because they allow you to speak it into the world and other people to process it with you and care about you and hold you. But those people don't normally, they haven't done a ton of research on coping skills and things like that. They can teach you what worked for them. And a lot of times what worked for them is amazing. But I would think, if you've got some pretty severe trauma, I would think not going to a counselor is going to hurt you more than going to one will. And I encourage, my daughters have all gone to see therapists, and I encourage them, shop around. You don't have to go with the first guy or gal you sit down with. Like, it's okay to say, I'm not sure we're meshing. I'm going to get another therapist,
That's some sage advice right there. A lot of people think, okay, I committed. Now I have to go. I don't like this person. They're not listening to me. They don't see me, but I'm still going to go.
I'm friends with some therapists, and they'll tell me all the time, they're like, look, man, if I'm not meshing with somebody and they leave me, I'm not hurt. Like, it's not like I'm running out of patience. I've got people that want to see me, but if they want to see somebody else, then my job is to go, have you tried Sharon? Maybe she'll work, They're like, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because, I think too, when you, especially people who've experienced trauma, asking for help is one of those things where at least that was my experience. It was exceptionally hard to ask for help. And, you know, I put myself out there a few times for a few different things, and I really felt rebuffed a couple times. And it just didn't, you know, ultimately I take responsibility for those situations, but I'm glad I kept going. You know,
Yeah,
because it's for me.
I think we've developed, and I think we're doing better. I know my age is people that are raising kids my age are doing a little bit better than like our parents did.
Yeah.
We're asking for help isn't a weakness anymore. I love these commercials. I don't know if you guys have them out there where I always think of the guy who's on the bench press and he can't push up the weight. And the
Yeah.
other guy's like, "Hey, you want some help, bro?" And he goes, "No, you don't know my family yet. I can't ask for help. I'll be fine." And he's literally being crushed under weights. And they say, you know, ask for help. It's okay. You know, and I think
I
that's a big thing that needs to be presented to people is that it's not a sign of weakness.
Mhm.
It makes you stronger. It's a sign of strength to have to step outside of your comfort zone and go, I can't do this. I need
Mhm.
help. Like that's okay. You're not supposed to be able to do all the things. You know, you're
Yeah.
not omnipotent. You're just one
Mhm.
person in a big, busy world. It's okay to
Yeah.
be like, I don't think I got this.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. You know, the other thing too that I think about is, you know, if you're dealing with somebody, a child that has behavioral issues or has experienced traumas, maybe you as the adult could use a support group as well, you know, like-minded people, because like it's the same idea. You know, you have all these thoughts and feelings and you don't want to necessarily take them out on the child.
Yeah, I definitely I talk about that in my book some about if you have a kid who's got you know some serious behavioral issues or some special needs or things like that, you know, there's no book on parenting a quote unquote normal child, let alone a book on how to you know do that. And I think that sitting with other parents or even going to a therapist as a family or just as a parent to be like I don't know what to do sometimes. I know my mom. Um, well, she just threw me out when I got, you know, old enough in high school and I just lived on my own. But I know before that, I look back and I've apologized, like, man, I put you in crisis a lot. Like I was kind of a tough kid to deal with,
Mhm.
and I wasn't mean or anything, you know, but I just did what I wanted when I wanted, and she's like, yeah, you were kind of difficult, and I think, man, you didn't know what to do, so
Yeah.
you did what you could do and you tried what you could try, in hindsight, I probably would have done things differently, but I wasn't my mom. You know, she was of a different era and they did things differently. But so I think, and with younger kids, you know, we get the choice to make choices for them when they're really
Mhm.
little. You know, we can take them to therapy with us, and a good therapist will make it seem like it's not therapy.
Yeah.
Teenagers are a tough nut to crack. I tell you, I work with kids all day that are teenagers, and I suggest to them like, "What do you need from us, man? I've got resources. Like, have you ever thought about talking to somebody?" And they're like, "I'm not going to see a therapist." I'm like, it's okay if you do, you know.
Mhm.
You know that's kind of a tough thing, and I feel like a lot of that's just stigma. We just got to crush that stigma. I think we're doing a way better job with it nowadays than we ever were. But just you know, demolishing and getting rid of that stigma around the idea that you can't ask for help, you can't see a therapist. You 100% can and should.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, I have this coach that I work with, and he's my coach. And he's a branding coach, and he was asking me about what my strengths were and all this. And I was like, you know, at a loss. And he said to me, and he didn't come up with this, but it really stuck with me. He goes, yeah, you know, it's really hard to read the label when you're inside the bottle. And that really stuck with me because it's true. We can't see ourselves. We can't necessarily see our issues. And that's where having a therapist or, you know, other people to show us what we need to see and help us walk through those things really comes in handy, wouldn't you say?
Oh, 100%. I know. I personally, I struggle with what they call imposter syndrome,
Mm.
and it's not super severe, but it's enough that you know, anytime my boss wants to talk to me, and she's a great lady, I'm like, she's probably gonna fire me. She's gonna figure out I'm not a very good principal. She's gonna figure out I shouldn't even be here. They made an error. They're gonna be like, why'd we even choose this guy? And in reality, I mean, I've completely turned my schools around, but
Mhm.
that doesn't matter. I still get up and I still have this idea. And so, yeah, I think, working through those things and understanding those things, it's easier to spot them in other people. But,
Mhm.
uh, it's a lot of self work, and it takes a lot of bravery to look inward and go, what is screwed up about me? Because I know I'm not perfect. And then
Exactly.
identifying it and saying, why am I like that? And what can I do
Mhm.
to change it? And how hard is it going to be? Because I don't know what level of work ethic I'm at right now for self
Mhm.
change. So how hard is this going to be? Are there baby steps? Do I have to take a big leap? It's difficult. I mean, self work is much harder than anything else.
Yes, it is. On that note, we do need to go to another commercial break, so we're going to be back in just a minute. And I said hello to everybody who is watching us live. Now it's my turn to say hello to everybody who is watching us on demand. Thank you so much for being here. When we come back, we're going to continue this conversation about self-work and also the elusive, oh, not so much fun stuff like trauma and all of these things, but it needs to be talked about. So we'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome to E360 TV, the live streaming and on-demand destination for influential voices and enlightened audiences. We offer trending, grassroots, and purpose-driven content across a diverse range of interests. E360 TV is more than just watching programs. We offer the ability to interact with live shows connecting audiences to real, authentic influencers and storytellers while streaming to millions of devices. Real experiences. Raw conversation. One destination for it all. E360 TV.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's bring our guest Joe back on. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So during the commercial break, I was thinking about a bunch of different things. And, we were talking about like this idea of doing this self-work. And, there's something you said that I really want to point out. And I think is really worth noticing and noting is like this idea of, do I want to actually put in this work or not to change this about myself? Because there's so many things that we'll say we want, but then we don't actually do. And then we manage to shame ourselves and feel even worse and do all that, it's like this vicious cycle where it's like, well, am I really actually, it's kind of like, am I interested or am I committed? It's okay if you're interested, but don't expect committed results,
Oh, definitely. I think that's why you need somebody, like a therapist or a group to do that self work, that inner work. Because
Yeah.
I mean, our level of holding ourselves accountable. I mean, there's some people who are great. When I was younger, I was in great shape up until about 46, and then I was like, I'm done. I'm just going to get fat. And there was a high level of self accountability and dependability that I had in myself. And once I stopped doing it, it just sort of tapered off. And I think that, when you have to do that inward work, especially emotional work and work that's going on with you and your behaviors and how you respond to things, and you have to say, these are the things that I don't do well. And these are the things I need to change because they affect my relationships, or they affect my response, or they affect my mental health, inwardly.
Yeah.
There has to be a level of accountability and somebody to kind of guide you through that, really call you out on your stuff and be like, you're doing it again,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
we are great. And I think working in addiction taught me this a lot. Like, we can justify just about anything if we let it sit in our brain long enough. I tell my students, like, your brain is a great place to go visit and hang out in once in a while, but you don't need to live there. You should never live there. Don't spend too much time. Get out, and I think we can rationalize any behavior if we hang out in our brain long enough.
That's a really good point. And it's like, when we start believing every single thought that we have, there's a problem there. But, I think too that, like, this idea of, it might be something you want to look at. Like, there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with a lot of the behaviors that we have, except when they affect us negatively and we decide that we don't want that anymore. Like, I was reading this book the other day, and this guy, his worst quality, like one of his worst qualities, is that he's really to the point. Like, he doesn't believe in small talk. He just gets right into it. Like, hey, this is what I want, and this is what I need from you, and this is what you get in return. But the thing is he's used that to create like this $1 billion company. So, where most people, myself included, and I'm kind of guilty of it myself a little bit, I find it very off-putting. It works
Yeah.
for him because people know exactly what they're getting when they talk to him. I mean, he's like super high level, but it's funny how, like, we could take these qualities and he made it work for him. But, that's not always the case, is it?
No, I like to think that when we talk about like mental health disorders, one of the things I talk about is like, it's not a disorder unless it causes disorder.
Ooh.
We all like this. You hear, if I had a nickel for everybody who's OCD, and I'm like, you're not OCD, you're just super organized. Like, look up OCD, really dive deep into that and figure out what, like, patterns are and rituals and how unhealthy those affect, when it becomes disorderly, it disordinates your regular ability to live and function, then it's a big deal. But those are hard things when we recognize that, this is something that's causing disorder. It's causing interruption in my life, and it's a pattern of behavior I've had for, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, however long you can identify it. And then going, how do I change that? And how much work is it going to take?
Yeah, exactly. Ooh, but it's kind of fun too if you can sort of, I think that's when having another person involved or a team of people that you work with, so it's not like you're doing it alone. It's not like this dark experience. You don't have to do this trudging walk all by yourself through the mud. It's like you're still doing the work. Because, like, there's this saying, I've been a personal trainer for years, and the saying is, I can't do your push-ups for you. And it's the same idea. Like, but I can be there and cheer you on, teach you how to do them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I actually want to pop up your book again so that people can get. There we go. There's another there it is. And it's available on all sorts of mediums, isn't it? I love that.
It's on Amazon, but I've got a thing on just about every social media you could think of. If you want to follow or anything like that, I try to throw. I think I'm kind of funny sometimes, so I try to throw out some funny stuff, but then some serious stuff too.
And what is your handle for, say Instagram?
The book Calming Young Minds.
Oh, okay.
All one really long word.
So easy to find. It's the title of the book. I like that. Okay, so I guess what I want to ask too is for, the adults out there that maybe don't have kids, but interact or have some sort of peripheral sort of interaction with kids that maybe have, their own behavioral issues or anything like that, what are some things that maybe as an adult we can just remind ourselves, hey, we don't know what this person's dealing with. They're not necessarily just some sort of, I mean, nobody's just a bratty kid. Nobody who's happy and has a perfect life acts like a jerk. I'm sorry, but it doesn't really work like that. But what would you recommend to somebody that maybe, just so they could quickly remind themselves in the moment?
I think keeping in mind that they see the world different. Young people see the world through a different lens, and it really is biological. It's a lot of it's based on their brain and how it's developed and how they process things, and they don't see it the same way you do. So don't expect them to see things the way you do. So be patient, listen, and ask questions that have nothing to do with you, because young people, it's all about them. I used to tell my daughter when she first started college, I said, "Oh, when you guys learn about teen brain development, you're going to learn that when you were between the ages of like 14 and 22, you were a narcissist." And she's like, "Oh my God, Dad." And I'm like, "I'm just saying." And so she took, Psych 101, which whenever you take Psych 101 in college, you come out being a full-fledged therapist. So she was like, "Yeah, Dad, teen brain development, young kids, like all they think about is themselves because that's all they know how to think about." I was like, "Yeah, exactly. And that's okay." So I think for adults, just keep in mind, be patient. Know that they may see the world completely different than you, and that's okay, because you saw the world that way too once. And your brain finished developing, hopefully, and now you see it differently. But you can't treat them like they're irrational, because, well, they kind of are irrational. Just be patient and keep in mind it rarely is about you. It's more about something else rather than you.
Exactly. Don't take it personal. It's true. And a lot of the times, something that a lot of people don't think about is, if you are that safe person to that child or that teen, then they probably are going to take it out on you because you're the safe person. So they feel like they can let out their emotions.
Yeah, I give 10 ways to be a solid object, I talk about in my book. And it's really what I've been preaching to educators and social workers and young therapists that I work with forever. Like, when you become that solid object, sometimes you're what they break themselves against. And rather than be angered, be honored. They trust you enough to know that I can completely lose myself and you'll still accept me, forgive me, and work with me and care about me. Like, I'm allowed to do that. It's safe for me to just be like, it's over. And when I'm done, you'll go, "All right, now let's talk about what just happened."
I love that. On that note, that is all the time that we have for today. Joe, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad we were able to figure out the internet connection. On so many levels, I'm grateful. But thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm honored that you would have me on here, and I feel blessed just to be able to share a few little things with all the viewers. It's an honor for me.
Thank you. And for those of you who are watching, go to Amazon, get the book. You can find it there. And also, that is all the time that we have for today. So everyone, thank you so much for watching, and we will be back. Let's see what day of the week. It's Monday. So we'll be back on Thursday. See you soon.